Hello and welcome to MIP TV, and with me is Bob Cook for the regular feature of TA Made Simple. And tonight Bob is going to explain a very crucial element in TA therapy, which is deconfusing the child ego state. What's that all about, Bob?
Correct, Rory. It comes after decontamination that we did last week. So if we talk about structural pathology and actually looking at the stuck parts within the ego state structure, after you've sorted out decontamination, so the person knows when they're in parent ego state, they know when they're coming from adult ego state, and they know when they're coming from child ego state, we can then contract to actually help the person deal with the confusion from the child ego state. In other words, helping them really heal their inner child deficits.
So it's possible we see clients who've had very difficult early parts of life, very difficult childhoods, and that part of them is carried through the arc of the life into adulthood. So what you're talking about is healing that deficit and maybe that hurts.
Correct, absolutely. And the first tool for that is really regression. In other words, going backwards. So you need to facilitate the client to go back to where the deficit actually was in the first place. So you need to start thinking developmentally. In other words, what age was the person developmentally when the deficit occurred? Was it to do with the relational disruption? Was it to do with cumulative neglect? Was it to do with abuse? Was it to do with trauma? You know, it's not usually just one particular trauma. I understand there's many places, especially, for example, if somebody was in a neglectful childhood. But you need to start thinking developmentally. So to go back to the child ego state, we have to have some thinking about where we're going back to. So you might actually go back to 10, 11, 12, 2, 3, 4, 5. So it's like going back through the onion layers, if you like. Now, from the integrated school of TA, there are methodologies which have been written down about how, or techniques, if you want to use that word, on how to do this. And they come from the Richard Erskine integrative model from transaction analysis. So let's look at them a few. So phenomenological inquiry would be one of them. Attunement would be another. Yeah, so in other words, let's start off with attunement. That would be actually attuning to the rhythm, the pacing, the terms of reference of the client as you go down the layers. Phenomenological inquiry would be inquiring about how come it was that way for you. What was happening all those years ago? So you're actually not having closed questions, you're having open questions as you go generally down the layers. Okay?
Yeah, how do you prevent a client re-traumatizing themselves as you're traveling back through time, Bob?
That's a very good question. So the first and most important thing actually is to have a very good working alliance, relationship with the client in the here and now. That's number one. Secondly, to see this whole process, this whole regression or this traveling back down in time as a process, not an event.
Right.
So you're going very gradually. Yeah, so you're not like going straight back to the age of 6 and doing a piece of deficit work. You're gradually going down. You've got a safe working relationship. You've got a secure base. And so you're going slowly to start off with, and you'll be asking a lot of questions. So how is this for you? Is this how it really was? You know, so you won't just go wham, bang, straight into the age of 3. So it's a process, not an event. Now, as you carry down, let's answer your question a bit more, and you get down to the trauma, there's a big difference from the original trauma here, and that is they have the therapist with them. As a witness. So as you start generally to very carefully unfold their story, it's very different from them reliving it or even re-experiencing it. It's more like you touch gently, like a feather. Yeah, like a feather with the actual client. And then you might go, it's a bit like a dance of intimacy. You may go back, you might come in again, but it's much more a process. That's a good way to think about this. And I like the metaphor of a feather, of course, because it's like the lightness of touch.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So that's really important here. It's not about, really isn't about going through defense systems, getting to whatever age we're talking about, and ask them to relive a horrific situation.
Sure. Yeah. So you're not being a bulldozer. You're not
No,
bulldozing through the history. You're
yeah.
walking very gently, almost like you're walking in a china shop, making
That's
sure the
right.
china doesn't fall. Yeah.
Yeah, and you're helping them make connections
Mm.
between past and present. You're helping them to look at enactments that they might be playing out from the past into the present. So all the time, if you like, you've got this dance going on of gentleness, backwards and forwards, and you go down the layers. So if, let's say, if there's a relational need for self-definition, that's where the trauma or the hurt was. So you're going with them. You're with them all the time. You don't leave them in that place. And then you start exploring. So, you know, Jeff, I'll make up a name here. You know, Jeff, who was it that so defined you? Let's go back in time and tell me, could you get to a figure who really defined you and took the ownership of your identity away? So you're going that way. So they might say, oh, yeah, it was, you know, that's my mother was so, you know, so much in the picture that I had to do what she said at all costs, because if I didn't, the consequences were too hard to bear. Oh, tell me a little bit more about that. Can you see that you're with them all the time?
Yeah, and they're setting the pace. They can tell you as much or as little as they want.
So what I've had inquiry,
Yep.
attunement, and a third method is involvement.
Right.
In other words, the therapists involve themselves proactively in the process. They aren't like an absent neutral. That is like you know the old psychoanalyst, where abstinence, being absent, was the name of the game.
Yes.
With
the bow tie and tell me about your mother and
with the humanistic, you know, TA therapist, the TA therapist being proactive, being with them in the relationship, being dependable, being in a sense of continuity, a sense of predictable, and most of all, on their side. Very different psychoanalytical, absent, neutral other.
Yes. Being an ally to the client.
Ally is a very good word, an ally. So you use these methodologies to go down into the ego state. You're helping the client having some clarity about what was so confusing and what was so ununderstandable. I like that word. In other words, what they could, well, you know, so from people coming to therapy mainly, well, one of the reasons, of course, to help understand or help and understand how come it was that way in life. How come my mother treated me that way? Bob, tell me, I didn't deserve that. I just don't understand. How come she infantilized me and defined me this way? It's almost I was like a puppet. I really don't understand. That's what I mean by not understandable. So you're going very gradually down, helping them sort out their confusion, what wasn't clear for them, helping them understand. And you might do some role play. You might say, okay, so, you know, if your mother was here, remember you're staying with them all the time?
Yeah.
How about you ask her how come she treated you this way? Now, you have to be very careful, because you were quite right about this retraumatization. So you need to be more potent than the actual parental interject themselves. So you're standing in between the client and the mother as an ally, as we said before.
Yes.
And maybe for the first time, with your help, they're starting to take ownership of their identity for the first time. That's what I mean by healing the child.
Yes. Yes. Allowing them to be who they want to be, as opposed to who they were defined to. Yeah.
The infantilizing process.
Yes. And of course, that would link strongly into script, wouldn't it? That's the process of rewriting the script, isn't it?
Yeah. As they start to take some clarity, started to get more clear about who really did, who was responsible, or actually understanding for the first time, understanding they can actually claim some agency. Then they can make some new decisions. Then they make some re-decisions, so they can be different in 2018.
Yeah. But you have to go to that part to find out where that decision needs to be made.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think I'm going to say again, so you've got inquiry, attunement, and involvement as methods to help aid the regression. Now you need to be, and this, I'm saying this again, I really like your word, you need to be an ally, a positive other.
Yes.
Because otherwise, you might repeat history for them. They may feel alone again. They may feel neglected again. They may feel so young again, and there's no one around to stand up for them. To say, Mother, what about Jeffrey? How come it was this way? He wants to talk to you. Let's get some understanding here. So that's why by involvement, the therapist needs to really step into what you and I know transference. They need to stand into in the transferential relationship.
Absolutely. And I suppose, in terms of the therapists themselves, they need to be understanding of their own process. It would be quite easy for them to get involved in their own transferential history as well.
Yeah, they need to have had their own therapy, their own supervision, and they need to leave their ego outside the therapy room.
Yeah.
Because they're working purely in the service of the client. They're providing that positive other, that reassuring parent that perhaps the person never had, and that can actually allow the client, maybe for the first time, to take some agency to actually say, this is me, or whatever we're talking about here.
Yes.
So that will be healing the hurt child in a transformational manner.
Yes. I mean, it sounds to me like, one of the things that defines TA is working in history. Whereas maybe in the humanistic world we don't do that as much. In TA, it's a defined path that's taken, isn't it? Going back to the original script, and then once that's defined, then asking the client how they want to rewrite the script, supporting them back. So that's really useful. I think if anybody's wanting to do a compare and contrast, maybe humanistic psychotherapy with TA, transactional analysis, there's a really big difference.
Yeah, and I think you define that way, and I would like to give a plea for something else in working in this area of deconfusing the challenging state, and it's very important. I've alluded to this before in previous videos in TA, but it's extraordinarily important here, and I'd really like to state it. That one of the big parts of transactional analysis psychotherapy is contractual theory.
Yes.
In other words, this is all done with the agreement and contractual, contractual process with the client. So they, you work out before and you talk about it in terms of agreement, focus, and contract. It's not done willy-nilly.
Yes, it's almost like inviting the client to go down, down a pothole, isn't it? And the contract is the strong object you tie the rope to. So when they go down,
very good. An adult-to-adult contract,
yes,
tie the rope, as you just said, and that means that they can always say, "Well, hang on a moment, I would like to come up a bit to discuss where we are," and then you might go down again.
Yeah.
So it's like together, you work out the map.
Yes.
And together, the understanding, the transferential maze is starting to be resolved. the new connections are being made, the new enactments are being made, and the new neural pathways are being formed.
Yes. That's really important, isn't it? Because, you know, in modern neuroscience, we know our brains are, you know, sometimes use the word plastic. They're not actually made out of plastic.
No, but that's
plasticity is the term,
that's
isn't it?
the key word, isn't it?
Yeah.
And we know the latest research shows that if you look in under the, read a lot of the books and look at some of the actual scans we're talking about, that you can actually see that plastic's a good word for this, that the new neural pathways are created on top of the old neural pathways. And this can be done with the process I'm talking about, with the child in the client making a new decision, and the new permissions are put in, and the new way of being is created over and over and over again, and most importantly, integrated into the new behavior of the client. And this takes time. You might visit the same place with the client many times as the new neural networks are formed and knitted together to integrate a new way of being for the client in 2018.
Yes. Yes. It's like learning any new skill, isn't it? You've got to practice it. You've got to practice it until you get that kind of motor skill in place. And I guess this is no different. It's a case of revisiting, you know, with the security of the therapist. And as I say, getting a sense of who you are in 2018.
Yeah, and you said something very, very important, which I'd like to make another plea here and reiterate. You know, the therapist with this type of work not only needs to be well trained, but they do need to have done their own therapy, because you can't go to these places unless you've started to really understand where you begin and the therapy ends. Sorry, the client ends for the. So it's really, really important. If you're going to do this type of long-time psychotherapy, because it is, what I'm talking about, knitting the neural pathways, you need to have done your own therapy.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because you get all sorts of transferential messes, can't you? And I could say also that if a client's coming back, regressing back, that if someone hasn't understood their own attachment style or their own history, then they may not be able to separate who they are from who the client is. You might get completely lost.
Absolutely. And if they don't understand transference, that's really important. Who is the client for you? What does the client project onto you? Two ways. One's the counter-transference, the other one is the projection onto you.
Yes.
You have to be able to understand that, because part of this rock climber analogy you talk about, going down into the hole with the rope being the contract, you know, but the actual therapist needs to be the anchor in the transferential mire, which is the glue to this deconfusion work that I'm talking about.
Absolutely. Absolutely. They really, I guess, you know, what I'm hearing is that the therapist needs a real strong sense of self-identity.
Right. That's a very good word to put it, because the client's sense of identity is usually being robbed, taken away. So they have a very fragile sense of self and often a very confused child. So the therapist has to really have a good sense of agency and strength of adult, and a potent, nurturing parent that will be part of this whole process in the service of the clients having clarity from a confused child.
Yeah. It's just so interesting hearing this work. It's not something that you come across in great detail on a day-to-day basis in terms of, you know, maybe the literature or YouTube or finding information. So that's really, really useful, Bob. And this really brings to an end a long line of videos that we've done on TA. And in the next one, we're going to look at the 5 schools. We're going to look at the 5 schools of TA and talk about the different developments from Burns board to Erskine and Charlotte Sills and
that's right. We're going to look at the developmental sequences in terms of the approaches of TA, from the early classical schools to where we are today with the relational schools of TA, the co-relational schools of transaction analysis, the Erskine school, the Regressing school, and we're going to look at all these approaches and still be able to say we're a transaction analyst.
Yes. Yes, truly spanning all the different disciplines, but still staying true to the roots of Burns' work, Burns' ideas.
So hopefully I can make them simple enough for the layman to really understand, well, when I look at TA, what type of TA or what type of TA therapist is there? When they say the person's a TA therapist, what type of TA therapist they are?
Yeah, very important. Very, very important to accurately match the client to the therapist.
Yeah.
So, Bob, that has been wonderful. And, we'll end it there. But as I say, we will come back with those 5 schools of TA in the next video. Don't forget, if you like what you're hearing, subscribe so you never miss a video when it drops. And why don't you stick a comment in the comments bar below? We always like a bit of feedback on TA theory. And as always, Bob, thank you very much.
Thank you, Roy.